Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating figure, Henri Bergson, a philosopher, Nobel laureate for literature, but honestly, his ideas feel like they belong in physics too.
That's a great way to put it. Bergson, yeah, his whole project, you could say, was about rescuing time from the clock. He saw physics, especially Newtonian physics, slicing reality into these neat little instants, right?
Measurable moments.
Exactly. And he just said, hold on, that's not how we live time. He insisted the real experience, the fundamental thing, is what he called durée, lived duration.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this continuous qualitative flow. Moments aren't separate points on a line. They kind of blend and interpenetrate.
Okay, so that's the core idea we're wrestling with. And our mission today is, well, it's ambitious. We want to take Bergson's insights, which are often quite poetic, intuitive, sometimes dense on time, memory, freedom, evolution.
All the big ones.
Right? And translate them, put them into the, let's say, the precise language of motion theory, MT. The goal is to see what actually holds up under modern neurobiology, what parts become genuinely testable science.
And a good starting point is his critique of how we usually think what he famously called the cinematographic illusion.
The movie analogy.
Yeah. The idea that our intellect naturally cuts up continuous reality into static snapshots, like frames in a film, just because it makes things easier to grasp, to analyze.
Easier to handle.
But he warned, don't confuse the tool, the snapshot, with the reality itself, which is the continuous motion.
And interestingly, motion theory kind of starts from a similar place, doesn't it? It agrees that those snapshots aren't fundamental.
Absolutely. MT sees those discrete moments as, well, artifacts, maybe useful computational tools for the brain for certain tasks, but not the underlying reality. For MT, reality is fundamentally ongoing, structured motion.
So before we dive deep into the MT specifics, let's quickly lay out Bergson's core concepts, the philosophy. You called it the poetry in our prep. What are the key pieces we need?
Okay, the poetry. Yeah, we need that foundation. First, durée. We've touched on it, but it's crucial. Time is lived, qualitative flow. Think about how time drags when you're bored or flies when you're having fun. That's durée, not the clock's ticking.
Right. The subjective experience of time's passage. Got it. What's next?
Then there's the élan vital, the vital impulse. This was Bergson's concept for the creative force behind evolution. He argued life isn't just mechanical or predetermined. There's genuine novelty, new forms emerging constantly, a kind of cosmic creativity.
A counter to purely mechanistic views of evolution.
Okay.
And the third key piece.
His distinction between two ways of knowing, intuition versus intellect. Intellect is the part of us that analyzes, measures, divides things up. It turns motion into static objects, symbols, useful but limited.
And intuition.
Intuition, for Bergson, was the way to grasp durée directly, to apprehend that dynamic flow, that becoming, without chopping it up.
Okay, poetry set. Now for the grammar. Motion theory. If reality is structured motion, how does MT redefine basic concepts like space and time? This is where it gets technical.
It does, but it's a necessary shift. So in MT, space isn't an empty box. It is the motion, or more precisely, unresolved background change, and time. Well, time isn't a river flowing. Time is rate.
Rate, as in speed.
Rate of change, rate of movement, rate of synchronization across that underlying motion. It's an operational measure, not a dimension you travel through.
Okay, that fits the flow idea.
Yeah.
But if everything is motion, how does anything stay stable? Thoughts, habits, memories. How does MT account for structure?
That's the critical question. Stability in MT arises from specific patterns of motion-forming loops. These loops need particular properties. We measure them with three main things. First, high synchronization density, which we call S.
Synchronization density, S. Can you give us a feel for that, like an analogy?
Sure. Think of a skilled musician or athlete in the zone. Everything flows perfectly. Movements are coordinated, efficient. That's high S. The system's components are working together very coherently to maintain that specific pattern of activity.
Okay, high S means strong, efficient coordination within the loop. What else?
Second, low leak, or R. If S is how synchronized the pattern is, R is basically how quickly it fades away or loses coherence. A stable memory or habit has low R. It persists.
So it doesn't just dissipate immediately.
Right. And third, there's coupling, C. This measures how strongly different stable loops influence each other. How much does one thought pattern affect the next? Or how does a sensory input loop affect a motor output loop?
So a stable habit would be high S, low R. And if it strongly triggers other actions, it has high C with those action loops.
You got it. And the mind itself. In MT, the mind is defined as this whole complex hierarchy of these coupled motion loops. Loops predicting things, loops retuning based on feedback, loops stabilizing the whole system.
Right.
It's structure made of motion.
Okay, this is powerful. Now we connect the dots. Let's do the translation.
Yeah.
How does Bergson's durée, that continuous flowing experience, map onto these measurable MT dynamics in the brain?
Durée, I think, maps very nicely onto the continuous update of these nested motion loops. Brain activity isn't static, it's what we call metastable,
Metastable.
meaning patterns persist, but they're constantly subtly shifting and updating. Think of watching ripples on a pond. The overall pattern is there, but the actual water molecules are always changing. It's stable, but fluidly so.
And we actually see evidence of this kind of fluid stability in the
Yeah.
brain.
Oh, absolutely. Things like neuronal avalanches, these quick bursts of coordinated firing that cascade through the network, or the characteristic 1F noise spectrum in EEG. These suggest the brain operates right at that sweet spot. Highly synchronized, but with enough flexibility, enough controlled chaos to allow for change and flow. That's durée in action.
Okay, so back to the cinematographic illusion. If the brain is this continuous flow, why do we perceive distinct events? Like seeing a flash of lightning is one thing.
That's where MT talks about discretization artifacts. Our perceptual system actively binds information together over specific time windows, usually, tens to hundreds of milliseconds.
Blinding, like grouping things.
Exactly. Think of flicker fusion. A light blinking fast enough looks like a steady beam, right? That's not reality itself being steady. That's your brain's processing window smoothing it out. It's resampling the continuous motion.
So Bergson had the movie metaphor, but maybe backwards. It's not that reality is frames we watch, but our brain creates the frames by segmenting the flow.
That seems to be the more accurate picture, yes. The brain discretizes for its own processing needs to handle the constant stream of motion.
That's a really fundamental shift. Okay, let's tackle memory. Bergson argued the past isn't stored away like an old photograph. It survives in the present as a kind of readiness or tuning. How does MT see memory?
It aligns incredibly well. MT views memory as present structure tuning. There aren't memory files. Instead, past experiences literally reshape the system. They tune the parameters, strengthen certain connections, adjust the leakiness of certain loops, bias the probabilities of certain patterns forming.
So the past physically changes the system's dynamics.
Precisely. The past is maintained as the current configuration and tuning of these motion loops.
But then what about the feeling of recall? When I consciously remember something, it feels like I'm accessing the past.
That subjective feeling, the pastness, is the system recognizing a complex pattern it's currently generating. Because the system is tuned by past events, when a cue triggers it, the network can reinstate a pattern of synchronization, leak, and coupling, SRC, that's very similar to the original experience.
So the feeling of past is the system running a pattern strongly influenced by prior tuning.
Exactly. It's the brain recognizing this current state is heavily shaped by that previous configuration. It's Bergson's idea of the contraction of the past into the present, but made mechanistic.
Elegant. Okay, freedom, another huge Bergsonian theme. He saw genuine freedom not as a random choice, but as an act reflecting the whole personality unfolding over time. What's the MT take?
In MT, freedom is understood as bandwidth for re-synchronization. Or, you could say, bandwidth for exploring and stabilizing different patterns of motion. Choices are essentially branching points, where the system stabilizes into one potential future state versus another, all within its operating constraints.
So more options, more potential stable states means more freedom.
Kind of. If your system has high overall coherence, if different loops are richly and diversely coupled, high C across many loops, you have a wider search space. You have more potential stable patterns you can settle into. That's high bandwidth.
And conversely, when we feel trapped, stressed, or limited.
That's a reduction in bandwidth. Stress hormones, illness, cognitive overload, these things can actually prune the available couplings, increase noise, make it harder to synchronize complex patterns. The number of viable, stable futures the system can easily access literally shrinks. That feels like a loss of freedom because there's a reduction in the available state space.
That's a very concrete way to think about it. Lastly, the élan vital. Creative evolution. Genuine novelty pouring out. How does MT explain novelty without resorting to a mystical life force?
MT explains novelty through search in mode space. Think of modes as potential patterns of motion the system could adopt. Most are unstable. But sometimes, due to changing conditions or internal dynamics, a previously unstable mode finds a way to become self-sustaining. A new stable loop emerges.
Like a phase transition.
Exactly like a phase transition in physics. Think water turning to ice, a new stable structure emerging under the right conditions. So, MT validates Bergson's core insight novelty is real, new forms do emerge, but it provides a dynamical systems mechanism, not a metaphysical one.
This translation really does bridge the gap. Let's shift focus slightly. Where did Bergson, relying just on intuition, get things remarkably right from a modern perspective? Where does current science seem to echo his thoughts?
Well, the most striking overlap is definitely time as lived rate. Neurophysiology completely backs this up. Subjective time isn't fixed. Your internal clock speed changes with arousal, attention, drugs, even body temperature. The perception of now is a construction, and its duration is flexible.
Which fits MT's sync rate clock idea much better than a rigid Newtonian clock.
Absolutely. It provides the potential mechanism for durée. Second big overlap. His emphasis on perception for action. The idea that we don't perceive passively like a camera.
Right, we perceive in order to act.
Exactly. Modern ecological psychology, predictive coding, they all converge on this. Perception is about picking up affordances, possibilities for action in the environment. We're constantly actively selecting information relevant for what we might do next. MT just adds the layer of how these affordances become stabilized patterns in the neural dynamics.
And the emergence of novelty.
Yes, novelty is real. As we just discussed, dynamical systems theory gives us mechanisms like self-organization and bifurcations where genuinely new, complex patterns can emerge spontaneously. It validates the spirit of élan vital without needing the vitalism. The universe, or at least complex systems within it, seems inherently creative in this way.
And even in something like motor control.
Yeah, that's a great example. Skilled movements, like speaking or playing an instrument, aren't planned as a series of jerky, separate commands. Neuroscience shows they're planned as smooth trajectories within low-dimensional manifolds.
Fewer variables controlling complex flowing actions.
Right. It confirms Bergson's emphasis on continuity over instance. The brain thinks in flows, not just snapshots, especially for action.
Okay, this is fantastic. We've built the bridge, shown the overlaps. Now for the payoff. The lab schedule. What are the concrete, testable predictions motion theory generates from operationalizing Bergson?
Right, this is where it gets really exciting. We've got 5 core predictions. Prediction A, duration is elastic. We predict that your subjective sense of time passing correlates with a specific measurable brain index related to synchronization speed, maybe a ratio of brainwave frequencies like beta and gamma power.
So if we could manipulate that index,
We should be able to change how long you perceive an event to last, or shift your temporal binding window. Make time feel faster or slower, experimentally.
wow. Okay, prediction B.
Intuition, low-dimensional flow. We predict that skilled, intuitive performance, that feeling of effortless expertise Bergson valued, relies on what we call manifold alignment. Meaning the brain activity driving the skill collapses onto a simpler, more efficient representation. Fewer variables explain more of the action. Higher synchronization density, S, within this simplified manifold should predict better, more intuitive performance. It's finding the optimal flow.
Linking intuition directly to neural efficiency. What about creativity, the Ellen vital spark?
Prediction C, creativity, controlled destabilization. We hypothesize that moments of insight involve a temporary increase in system variability, a kind of desynchronization, maybe in mid-frequency bands like alpha or beta. This loosening allows exploration of new patterns, new modes.
But it can't be pure chaos.
Exactly. It has to be controlled destabilization. You need to maintain overall coherence, probably via slower rhythms, and then quickly interlock into the newly discovered stable, creative solution.
Instability in the service of finding new stability. Makes sense. Prediction D.
Memory as present tuning. If memory is about changing the system's parameters, then after learning something new, we should see changes in the brain's background activity, its resting state. Specifically, the resting state network should show spectral peaks shifted towards the frequencies used during the task.
The background hum reflects the new skill.
And also, those spontaneous replay events neuroscientists see. We predict they should specifically increase the synchronization density S for the network patterns related to the learned information, effectively strengthening that tuning.
Solidifying the memory trace dynamically. Okay, and the last one, E.
Prediction E, freedom bandwidth. We predict that under measurable stress, say high cortisol levels or intense cognitive load, the diversity of actions you consider or can easily perform should shrink. We should be able to measure a lower entropy, a narrower range of potential stabilized action patterns.
Fewer options become available.
Right. And conversely, if we could boost overall brain coherence, maybe by enhancing slow-wave synchrony, we predict we could actually widen that bandwidth again, restoring a greater range of potential choices.
This is genuinely groundbreaking stuff, taking philosophy and making it empirically testable. But let's be fair, where does MT have to gently part ways with Bergson or upgrade his ideas?
Well, the most obvious one is the élan vital itself. As a concept, it's poetic, but scientifically it doesn't do much work. MT replaces it with concrete mechanisms: energy flows, system constraints, feedback loops, nonlinear dynamics leading to emergent stability. It explains how novelty arises.
And Bergson's famous skepticism about mathematics capturing time.
Yeah, we have to push back on that a bit. We don't reject math, we just argue Bergson was critiquing the wrong kind of math for the job. MT uses dynamical systems theory, stochastic calculus math, specifically designed to handle flow, change, becoming. It embraces durée mathematically.
So using math that respects the flow, what about his critique of Einstein?
We'd soften that significantly. Bergson didn't seem to fully appreciate that proper time and relativity is observer-dependent. It is about rate along a world line. That's actually much closer to durée than the universal clock he was fighting against. MT kind of bridges this by focusing on the internal synchronization rate within a system.
That focus on rate and synchronization opens doors back to fundamental physics, doesn't it?
It really does. Consider quantization. Those specific energy levels in atoms, the standing waves and orbitals, they're like physical versions of Bergson's idea. Only certain patterns of motion fit the boundary conditions and endure. Duration, in a physical sense, is about the survivorship of stable vibrational modes.
Stability through fitting the constraints.
Exactly. And think about thermodynamics. Living things are dissipative structures. We maintain our complex form by constantly taking in energy and dissipating waste heat. That's Ilya Prigogine's Nobel-winning work. It's like Prigogine meets Bergson.
How so?
We actively pay with energy dissipation to maintain low leak R in our essential motion loops. We build and maintain our structure, our flow, against the tendency towards disorder. Becoming is an active, energy-costly process of maintaining form through motion.
Okay, let's wrap this up. To synthesize this deep dive, Bergson had this profound intuition about putting becoming, flow, durée at the heart of reality. Motion theory seems to provide a way to do that rigorously, scientifically, using the right mathematical tools.
Yeah, MT treats structures not as static things, but as patterns of synchronized motion. Time isn't a container, it's the rate of that motion's change. And creativity isn't magic. It's the emergence of new stable patterns, new loops, right at the edge of instability.
Bergson gave us the poetry of flow. MT gives us the instruments to measure it, the predictions to test it, and essentially a lab schedule. And the really sticky idea here, the one to leave you thinking about, is that the past isn't gone. It's not behind you. It's literally built into the tuning of your brain right now, shaping what patterns can emerge next. Which leads to our final question for you. What does it truly mean for your future choices if freedom is fundamentally just the bandwidth you have for resyncing your own internal motion?
That's definitely something to chew on.
Something to contemplate.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.